This was the title that I was given. I really don't remember if I suggested it myself, but I've been looking at it over the last couple of days and I really don't understand what it says. Significance of SRHR within women's rights and how they are translated globally. So I'm not going to answer that. I'm going to talk around it in a sense and hopefully give you some insight after all. I was really impressed with all these abbreviations that you have. I have a difficulty with abbreviations, so I will start with questioning SRHR. It has to do with our sexuality and our reproduction, the basis for how we organize our lives. It has to do with our greatest joys and worst traumas. And our sexuality is both the most public and the most private of all. We boast of our children and grandchildren, and people know how children are made. So implicitly, we talk about our sexuality, but at the same time, our sexuality is protected. So it's this tension between the very private and the very public. And I think it's a terrible abbreviation, especially the word reproduction. I mean, normally we think of real paintings, true paintings, and the reproductions, which are not the proper ones. And then we wrap this all in abbreviation SRHR. And I think we have to be aware all the time what this is about. It's the basis of how we organize our lives. I'll talk about the global arena. I'll not talk about all the global issues, but I'll talk a bit about the global arena. And I was very happy when Johanne talked so warmly about what's happening in the UN, because it's very easy to criticize it. And it's far from ideal, but it's the best we have. And sometimes it can be quite beautiful. This may be how people see the UN. Different people from around the world holding hands, going towards a common goal. I don't know if it's only children who see it that way. This is a proper UN meeting. You see, it's quite messy. One is talking on the phone. I guess some are sleeping, some are doing their own things. And yet, it is dynamic. But this is actually how it's taking place. We are dealing also with different cultures, and we talk about the importance of respecting culture or taking culture into account. The anthropologist Bob Scholt, I'm not quite sure how he pronounced it, he saw culture in perspective of power. He says culture is often seen as webs of significance of man himself, that man himself has spun. But in reality, few do the actual spinning, while the majority is simply caught in the web. Culture is real, but culture is not power neutral. And I think it's important to remember that. And I'll take you to a few golden moments. I was very happy when people talk about the Cairo conference. Again, it has an abbreviation, ICPD. And then in 1999, we discussed the follow-up from the Cairo conference. There was the Unholy Alliance, the Holy See, and some Catholic-dominated countries and some Muslim-dominated countries. They protected culture, the culture. Then, to our big surprise, Israel suddenly came on board. And they were represented by a female rabbi. And we thought, a rabbi, is she going to join the Unholy Alliance? What on earth is going to happen? But to our surprise and our pleasure, she was extremely productive and very, very helpful. This was a Friday afternoon, 5:45 in the afternoon. She had to leave by 6 o'clock because of the Sabbath coming up. And then there was this, and I'll read it to you just to show how complicated the UN language is. But it's negotiated language. Everybody's sitting there, and you know, in the messy thing you saw, and we create language. And it's the following. This has to do with adolescents and their rights. With due respect for the rights, duties and responsibilities of parents, and in a manner consistent with the devolving capacities of the adolescent and their right to reproductive health, education, information and care, and respecting their cultural values. The draft was respecting the cultural values. And we said, absolutely not. Respecting the culture means no change. Culture is very much a preservation. Then this rabbi added 2 letters from respecting the culture, which is then spun by a few and the others are caught in the web, to respecting their culture, the culture of the adolescents. Made a lot of difference. 2 letters. It's very important in these discussions not to kind of shuffle around with words. Just add one not, take away a not, you know, that can make a lot of difference. Or add 2 letters and you change the whole setting. I'll not read the rest of it. It's this complicated UN language, but please do not read it as poetry. It's not poetry. It's really complicated processes. So instead of this idyllic holding hands, it's many times more like a fencing match, you know, kind of getting the right wording in at the right time. And when this rabbi came up with this suggestion, I was looking at the seat of the Holy See, and I saw them panicking completely. But it would look very ugly in the UN system if the Holy See, the Vatican, would go against a female rabbi. You see, so it actually wouldn't look good, and I just saw them panicking, and before they could react, it was adopted. So actually, the adoption was that young people's culture should be respected. Isn't that a beautiful thing? So there are these golden moments. Other golden moments have been in the Commission on Population and Development. Those are like abbreviations. It's a CPD. That's the yearly meeting of the custodians of the ICPD, the Cairo Conference, again, abbreviations. A few years ago, the Filipino Minister of Health was going to give the talk from the Philippines. We got it in writing, but in the UN, it's the spoken word that counts. So it always says, check against delivery. Very clearly, the talk of the minister was written by somebody else, because what she did there and then, she turned everything around. The Philippines has had a very complicated history of reproductive health, and especially reproductive rights. In the late 1990s, it was actually suggested to have death penalty for taking abortions. And at that time, women had an average 2 abortions through their life. So they are actually discussed quite seriously to introduce death penalty for something that women did on average twice through their life. So it's just a demonstration of the complexity of reproductive rights in the Philippines. Then to experience within the UN system the change in the Philippines. Now the Philippines have introduced a law of reproductive health. It was then challenged, of course, by the conservatives, and it was taken to the Supreme Court to check against the Constitution. It was decided that it was constitutional, but they had some amendments. So sometimes you can really experience changes in the country, and it's reflected in the UN system. Last year, the Commission on Population Development has its meetings in April, and last year in April, it was such a surprise to hear countries, quite conservative countries, talk about sexual rights. Sexual rights is not adopted, it's not approved UN language, but now more and more countries are actually talking about it. So over the years, there's been really a change. I was in Cairo, I was negotiating the ICPD in Cairo. So I've seen the changes over these 20 years, and it's actually quite fantastic to see that something is happening. It's going slowly, 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 but it's going. And so within these bigger environments, you can see how the national processes are going. There is an agreement on reproductive health and on sexual health, on reproductive rights, not on sexual rights. But it is It is from 1994. There is reluctance to open it because it's quite actually progressive the way it is, and we have a feeling that if it's opened up, then one could go backwards. Some of the targets got into the MDGs, and I'm really amazed, that you are so good with these abbreviations. And we'll soon have the SDGs, another acronym, the Sustainable Development Goals. We'll see how reproductive health fares then. The most controversial issues are adolescent sexual health, abortion, what I prefer to call sexual diversity, or LGBTI if I prefer, and Malcolm talked about LGBT. I'm always afraid of forgetting the I because then you put in the group. There's lots so much playing with these abbreviations, so I prefer the term sexual diversity because I think it describes what we're talking about. This is a student conference, and I would like to stress the importance of knowledge. The two stumbling blocks in Cairo to get reproductive health approved was it was abortion. We negotiated the definition of reproductive health. We discussed and negotiated abortion, and also, of course, all the other issues. And actually, knowledge was very important. I realized that there's much more to it than knowledge, but knowledge is quite important. And steadily say, yes, but here are all the arguments, and say, yes, but women are dying because of it. Yes, but we know that young people don't get crazy from getting sexuality education. They actually become more responsible in their behavior. Yes, we hear what you're saying, but this is the knowledge. And it does bring things forward. It's not the whole thing, but it really brings things forward. It is winning ground, but then knowledge is created, it's used, it's distorted, and it's denied. So it's important to really be aware of the knowledge, and then to combine it with wisdom, the way it's used in the actual situations. So I think it's very important for you as students to realize how important knowledge is also in these negotiations. And if one can back things with knowledge, with good data, and then used wisely, it can really have a huge impact. Now, it's very hard for the opposition, for instance, in the area of abortion, to say that we need strict abortion laws to lower the numbers, because we know now that strict abortion laws do not lower the numbers. There are some good arguments to promote women's health. So now the opposition is using the family as a fundamental thing for our lives. I'm presently reading a book by the fantastic Somali author Norwegian. And in it, I found this quotation from Willem Reich, who was a psychoanalyst, who actually has strong links to this country. He says, in the figure of the father, the authoritarian state has its representative in every family, so that the family becomes its most important instrument of power. I think it's a fantastic way to link these two levels, the family and the state. And I think it also illustrates why the opposition is using the family, the patriarchal family, as such an instrument, such an important power vehicle for their own power. So, back to the UN, I wanted just to give a little glimpse of what is happening inside the building that you have seen so many times on TV and elsewhere. So thank you very much for your attention.